Along the Atlantic coast, 13 British colonies grew into busy communities of farmers, merchants, and craftspeople. Their harbors and town greens pulsed with local energy and ambition. Most colonists still saw themselves as proud British subjects. They read British books, drank British tea, and remembered fighting in British wars. The recent 7 Years' War had been costly. British leaders looked to the colonies to help pay the bills, setting the stage for conflict. Colonial critics argued that Parliament should not tax people who had no representatives in London. The slogan, "No taxation without representation," spread quickly. Protesters met under Liberty trees to pass resolutions, hang effigies, and organize boycotts of taxed goods. Local assemblies had long set taxes and laws, giving colonists a strong habit of self-government that clashed with new imperial rules. Newspapers carried news and arguments from one colony to another, turning local grievances into shared causes. New England villages, mid-Atlantic ports, and southern plantations differed, but many colonists shared worries about taxation and control. To keep order, Britain stationed troops in Boston. Their drums and bright coats made some feel safer, and others feel occupied. Arguments and insults between soldiers and citizens became common. A city of tight streets and sharp words turned volatile. On a frigid March night in 1770, confusion and fear led soldiers to fire into a crowd, killing several colonists in what quickly became known as the Boston Massacre. Engravers turned the event into stark images of soldiers firing on helpless civilians, inflaming colonial opinion far beyond Boston. In 1773, the Tea Act gave the East India Company special privileges, convincing many colonists that Parliament was trying to trick them into accepting its authority. Patriot leaders in Boston planned a dramatic protest. They would destroy the taxed tea rather than let it be unloaded and sold. On a December night, men disguised as Mohawks boarded the ships and dumped hundreds of chests into the harbor, turning water brown with protest. Britain reacted with the coercive acts, closing Boston's port and tightening royal control to make an example of Massachusetts. Instead of leaving Boston alone, other colonies sent food and support, seeing the punishment as a threat to all of them. Committees of correspondence kept patriots in different colonies informed, turning scattered protests into coordinated resistance. In 1774, delegates from 12 colonies met in Philadelphia to petition the king, discuss boycotts, and plan a united response. Even as they sent a respectful petition, many colonists quietly stored powder and organized militia, ready in case words failed. In April 1775, British troops marched out of Boston toward Lexington and Concord to seize weapons and arrest troublemakers. Riders like Paul Revere galloped through the night shouting warnings, waking towns, and calling out the militia. At Lexington, a small line of militia faced the British column. A sudden unexplained shot turned tense silence into gunfire. At Concord's North Bridge, militia drove British troops back. The rebels had shown they would fight rather than yield. On the long road back to Boston, British soldiers faced fire from behind stone walls and trees as militia swarmed from every village. Militia from across New England surrounded Boston, trapping British troops in the town and turning protest into a siege. When news of Lexington and Concord spread, many colonists realized there was no easy way to return to the old relationship with Britain. Congress decided the scattered militias needed to become a united Continental Army, with George Washington chosen to lead it. Washington rode to the Boston siege, bringing a calm presence and a reputation for courage that impressed many soldiers. He found eager volunteers but short supplies and uneven discipline. The army needed food, powder, and practice. The recent battle at Bunker Hill had cost the British dearly, proving that colonial fighters could stand up to redcoats in a pitched fight. Shortages of powder and pay threatened morale. Washington had to plead with Congress while keeping his troops from melting away. Henry Knox led teams across snow and ice to haul captured cannons from Fort Ticonderoga, a feat of strength and determination. Cannons on Dorchester Heights suddenly threatened British ships and positions in Boston, giving Washington a decisive advantage. In March 1776, British troops evacuated Boston, and colonists celebrated their first clear victory of the war. Washington knew the British would strike again elsewhere. He turned his attention toward defending New York and the Middle Colonies. Even after fighting began, many colonists hoped the king would reign in Parliament and restore harmony without full independence. Thomas Paine's pamphlet Common Sense argued that monarchy was absurd, and independence was the natural path, in language ordinary people could grasp. In 1776, delegates met again in Philadelphia, now under the sound of marching boots and looming British fleets, to debate independence. Congress tasked Jefferson with writing a declaration that explained why the colonies were breaking away from Britain. Jefferson's draft was edited by Adams, Franklin, and the full Congress, leaving a final text that blended compromise and bold statements. On July 2nd, Congress voted for independence. 2 days later, they approved the wording of the Declaration itself. The Declaration was read aloud in town squares, spreading its ideas about equality and rights far beyond Philadelphia. Some colonists remained loyal to Britain, fearing that independence would bring chaos or ruin. The Revolution divided communities as well as uniting them. In late 1776, Britain seized New York after a series of battles, forcing Washington into difficult retreats but not destroying his army. On a cold December night, Washington led a surprise crossing of the icy Delaware River to strike at Trenton. Victories at Trenton and Princeton lifted morale and showed that boldness could offset earlier defeats. Even with these successes, the war dragged on, consuming food, money, and lives. Many wondered how long the new United States could endure. In 1777, American forces won a major victory at Saratoga, capturing a British army and proving the rebels could win big battles. Impressed by Saratoga, France signed treaties and openly joined the war on the American side, bringing money, ships, and guns. British strategy shifted south, hoping loyalists would help regain control. The southern colonies became a new, brutal front. Battles flared along coasts, rivers, and frontiers. The Revolution was no single battlefield, but a patchwork of distant struggles. The winter of 1777-1778 at Valley Forge tested the Army's spirit with cold, hunger, and illness. New drills and training slowly turned volunteers into a more disciplined fighting force ready for bigger battles. Washington faced criticism and whispers of replacement, yet he stayed focused on holding the army together instead of grabbing more power. When spring came, soldiers marched out of Valley Forge more unified and confident than when they entered. In the South, Patriot fighters used hit-and-run tactics, ambushing British forces and vanishing into forests and swamps. Native nations weighed their own interests, sometimes siding with Britain, sometimes with the Americans, and often simply trying to survive the struggle around them. Civilians of all backgrounds endured shortages, burned farms, and constant fear as armies passed through their fields and towns. In 1781, British General Cornwallis moved his army to Yorktown, Virginia, to rest and resupply, not realizing he was stepping into a trap. Washington and French commanders coordinated a bold plan. French fleets would block the sea while Allied armies trapped Cornwallis by land. American and French troops dug trenches and gun positions, slowly tightening a ring of fire around the British defenses. Night attacks captured key British redoubts, pushing the siege closer to Cornwallis's center and shaking British morale. With his position hopeless, Cornwallis agreed to surrender his army, signaling that Britain's war in America was effectively lost. News of Yorktown crossed the ocean and stunned London, where many now doubted the value of continuing the war. In 1783, the Treaty of Paris officially recognized the United States as independent. Franklin and other diplomats negotiated the terms. Washington resigned his military command and returned to private life, showing that the new nation would not be ruled by a general king. The Revolution did not bring freedom to everyone, but its words about rights and consent of the governed would influence future fights for equality. Our tiny storytellers remind us that the American Revolution was years of protests, debates, defeats, and daring gambles, not one instant. If you enjoyed this chibi journey from protest to independence, join us for more Birth of a Nation episodes.